mythology, and folklore. Although they are closely intertwined, they serve distinct cultural functions. Mythology refers to structured systems of belief, narratives that deal with the gods, the creation of the world, cosmology, and the metaphysical order. Myths often served a religious or ideological function, offering explanations for natural phenomena and legitimizing political and social structures. Folklore, on the other hand, emerges from the lived experiences of ordinary people. It includes legends, fairy tales, superstitions, proverbs, songs, and rituals, passed down orally through generations. Folklore is more dynamic, often shaped by local traditions, changing political landscapes and cultural exchanges. While myths usually concern gods and heroes, folklore deals with spirits, monsters, magical creatures, and moral tales that reflect everyday life. In the Slavic world, the line between the two is sometimes blurred. Pre-Christian Slavs had a mythological system, complete with gods like Perun, the god of thunder, or Veles, the god of the underworld. Once Christianity took hold, many mythic figures were either demoted or survived through folklore. As a result, what we know today as Slavic folklore is a complex fusion of pre-Christian mythology, medieval superstition, local legend, and oral storytelling. Spanning Eastern Europe, the Balkans, parts of Central Europe, and Russia, Slavic folklore is a shadowed, elemental world. Its creatures often carry dual meanings, protectors and predators, warnings and wisdom, more than entertainment. These stories reflect the values, fears, and mysticism of the Slavic peoples. These beings are not just monsters, but metaphors, each revealing layers of Slavic cultural memory, pagan remnants, and psychological archetypes that still linger in tales told today. Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga is perhaps the most iconic figure in Slavic folklore. The word Baba is a common Slavic term for old woman or grandmother, sometimes with affectionate overtones. However, the second part Yaga is less clear. Scholars trace it to words implying horror, disease, or anger. Thus, Baba Yaga could be translated roughly as grandmother horror, crone of poison, or witch of pain. In oral traditions and illustrations, Baba Yaga is described as a bent old woman, with iron teeth, sometimes called steel fangs. A nose so long, it scrapes the ceiling when she sleeps, wild unkempt hair, warts or boils on her face, a voice like wind howling through branches. She travels with a mortar, which is a magical bowl, big enough for her to ride in, like a flying vessel, steering with a pestle, a tool used to pound the ingredients inside the mortar, that she uses to propel herself, and a broom made of silver birch, that she uses to erase her path, so no one can follow her. Her hut stands on giant chicken legs, sometimes rotating constantly, accessible only when one chants. Turn your back to the forest, and your front to me. Scholars and folklorists have interpreted Baba Yaga in a variety of ways. Carl Jung's followers often describe her as the terrible mother archetype. The terrible mother is the dark side of the mother figure. While a good mother represents nurturing, life, the womb, security, and grounding, a terrible mother represents devouring, death, the grave, chaos, and destruction. The creature appears in hundreds of Slavic folktales, usually as a solitary obstacle to the hero's goal. However, she is not always an antagonist. She's often a tester of virtue, a keeper of sacred knowledge, and a metaphor for the danger and wisdom of the wild. In Vasilisa the Beautiful, the protagonist is sent to Baba Yaga's hut by her jealous stepmother to fetch fire. Instead of killing her, Baba Yaga assigns impossible tasks. With the help of a magical doll, a gift from the girl's deceased mother, the heroine succeeds, earning the creature's grudging respect and receiving a skull lantern that ultimately punishes her abusers. In Ivan and the Firebird, Ivan visits Baba Yaga to gain advice. In other tales, she kidnaps children or devours heroes who fail her tests. Unlike purely mythological deities, Baba Yaga has lived on in rural Slavic imaginations for centuries. During the 19th century, ethnographer Alexander Afanasiev recorded a tale where a woman in a remote village, claimed to have met the old forest mother, who appeared during a harsh winter, and left a bundle of firewood outside her door, with bones scattered around it. Locals interpreted the visit as a warning and a gift in one. In 1933, in the region of Podlasie, a man claimed to have wandered into the woods during a fever and found himself in a spinning house with a screeching voice telling him to sweep the bones from the floor. He awoke by a marsh with a skull nearby. In some Belarusian villages, old women would warn children that if they didn't behave, Baba Yaga would smell them from the forest. She smells children like baking bread. A few local healers even left small bread offerings at the forest edge on certain nights of the year. In recent decades, Baba Yaga has enjoyed a cultural renaissance, often featured in Russian fantasy literature, Andrzej Sapkowski, Catherine Valenti, and dark fairy tale retellings. She also appears in films and games like Hellboy, The Witcher, Tomb Raider, and Pathfinder RPG. Baba Yaga is not a witch in the narrow, Western fairy tale sense. She is a force. To the Slavic peasant, she represented the danger of the woods, the unknown powers of womanhood, and the sacred rules of respect towards nature and ancestors. She remains, eternally, the grandmother who blesses and who devours. Domovoi. Of all Slavic folk beings, the domovoi is perhaps the most personally revered. Unlike distant deities or forest-dwelling witches, the domovoi lives with the family, hidden, yet present in every daily ritual. He is the spirit of the household, protector of the home, and those who reside within. His presence represents a profound blend of pagan spirituality, ancestor worship, and practical domestic morality. The term domovoi comes from the word dom, meaning home in Slavic languages. The domovoi is not simply a ghost or a household elf. He is the soul of the house itself, a metaphysical being who enforces moral order, punishes misbehavior, and offers unseen aid when respected. Though usually invisible, it is sometimes described in folk accounts as a small, bearded old man, rarely more than a foot tall, covered in hair or soot, resembling the hearth where he lives, wearing traditional peasant clothing, sometimes barefoot, having glowing eyes or feet that never touch the ground. The domovoi lives under the stove, beneath the threshold, in the cellar, or behind the hearth, depending on regional tradition. He is deeply territorial and emotionally invested in the welfare of the household. His personality ranges from helpful and nurturing to capricious and wrathful. He may tend to livestock or pets, rock babies in their cradles, warn of impending disasters with moaning, whispers, or phantom footsteps, play pranks when displeased, hiding objects, causing milk to sour, tangling thread. In some interpretations, the domovoi is a deified ancestor, usually the original patriarch of the family line. Even after the Christianization of the Slavic world, belief in the domovoi remained resilient. Churches condemned him as a demon, yet rural folk continued to honor him covertly, often blending rituals with Christian customs. Over time, the domovoi became a folk Christian hybrid. Some people invoked him as a guardian angel of the home. Others drew parallels between him and the Christian soul of the householder who had passed. Even today, in some Russian villages, elders still perform quiet gestures, like crossing themselves before moving homes, whispering invitations to the domovoi, leaving small food offerings during storms or family illness. Families left bread, salt, milk, tobacco, or a piece of clothing behind the stove or in the attic. Before a move, people would say, "Domovoi, domovoi, come with us to the new house, not to stay here with the devils." When welcoming a domovoi into a new home, families would perform purification rites and offer blessed bread and incense. Whistling indoors was forbidden. It might provoke him. Spilling water without apology, slamming doors, or excessive arguing could drive him away. Excessive neglect of chores or disobedient children were also said to anger him. Accounts of the domovoi span centuries. In Tula, during the 1890s, a farmer named Pyotr reported that the domovoi slapped him awake the night before a fire engulfed the neighbor's barn. When he ran outside, he noticed sparks had just caught in his own haystack. He credited the domovoi with saving his life and left an offering of bread and tobacco every month afterward. A widow once heard footsteps pacing in her attic. Every night after her husband died, her dog refused to enter the room. A wise woman told her to offer bread and say aloud, "Come sit with us. Grandfather, you are welcome here." The footsteps ceased. Later, when her daughter fell gravely ill, she dreamed of the domovoi standing over the child, touching her brow. The girl recovered within the week. Children were told never to play near the stove after dark. One girl, disobedient, claimed she saw a bearded little man with glowing eyes under the woodpile. When she screamed, her mother said the domovoi only shows himself when angered, or when someone is about to die. Psychologically, the domovoi externalizes the anxiety and order of domestic life, turning household morality into a tangible, interactive presence. In modern culture, the domovoi has appeared in Russian fantasy novels, like Sergei's Night Watch series, video games, such as The Witcher 3. The domovoi is more than a folktale. He is a worldview, a belief that home is sacred, and that every broom sweep and loaf of bread holds ancestral meaning. In every creak of floorboards, every whisper during winter nights, every flicker of candle flame, we still hear the old man of the hearth watching over us. Rusalka. The rusalka is a deeply evocative being, at once alluring and terrifying. Often described as a female water spirit, the rusalka haunts the edges of civilization. Dwelling in lakes, rivers, and marshes, she is commonly the ghost of a young woman who died before her time, especially by drowning, and often under tragic or unjust circumstances. Betrayal, suicide, murder, or even infanticide. The term rusalka likely derives from the Latin Rosalia, a name for Pentecost or Whitsuntide festivals that commemorated the dead. The name was Slavicized during the Christianization period to refer to spirits associated with Pentecost week. Descriptions of rusalki vary depending on region and time period, but common traits include a young and strikingly beautiful maiden with long flowing hair, often green, blonde, or black. Wet or tangled hair, sometimes perpetually dripping. Pale or slightly greenish skin, either completely nude or wearing a simple white dress or burial shroud. A chilling, unnatural silence, or a soft, seductive singing voice. Her presence is often preceded by unnatural wind over still waters, sudden fog, or the sound of distant laughter. She is typically a young woman who died violently or unjustly, often due to betrayal by a lover or husband, suicide due to unwanted pregnancy, or murder by family or community, especially in cases of dishonor. In many stories, the rusalka lures men and children into the water. Her victims often die by drowning, strangulation, or madness. Some tales claim she tickles her prey to death or binds them in reeds. What makes the rusalka especially powerful in the Slavic imagination is her ambiguity. She is both a remnant of pagan fertility spirits and a ghostly revenant, sometimes benevolent and sometimes vengeful. Her stories echo themes of female suffering, loss, and retribution. Older traditions depict the rusalka in a more neutral or even beneficial light. Emerge in the spring to fertilize the earth and bringing moisture and fertility to field. The most active period for rusalka is the week following Pentecost, known in Russia as Rusalnaya Nedelia. During this time, swimming is forbidden, and villagers avoid rivers and marshes at dusk. Rituals include the weaving of garlands, symbolic drownings, and offerings thrown into water. Though largely considered mythological, there are dozens of folkloric testimonies recorded by ethnographers and rural villagers. In 1882, a woman reported seeing a pale girl brushing her hair at the edge of a pond just before sunrise. When she approached, the girl turned to face her. Her face was featureless and dripping water. She vanished into mist. In 1911, a shepherd boy went missing near a marsh. His brother claimed to have seen a naked woman with Lila in her hair, playing in the reeds and calling the boy's name. They found the boy's clothes, but never his body. In 2006, on a Russian online forum, Eamon shared that while fishing near Lake Seliger, he dreamed of a woman in a white dress who asked him for her name back. The next morning, he awoke with his hair soaked and a perfectly formed circle of Lila around his camp. The Rusalka captured the imagination of 19th and 20th century Slavic artists, like Alexander Pushkin and Antonin Dvorak's. Psychologically, the Rusalka can be seen as a manifestation of collective grief, specifically female grief unacknowledged by society. She represents female suffering, especially due to patriarchy, lost innocence, or societal shame. Her watery domain symbolizes the subconscious, emotional trauma, and repressed memory. In every tale of the Rusalka, we hear the mournful voice of the past asking to be acknowledged, and perhaps, finally, laid to rest. Kostya the Deathless. In the shadowy world of Slavic folklore, few names strike as much dread as Kostya the Deathless. Kostya is a distinctly human-like antagonist, a tyrant, kidnapper, sorcerer, and embodiment of death. The epithet deathless sets him apart. Kostya is not invincible. He can suffer, be bound, or defeated temporarily. But his death is externalized, hidden far away in magical containers, rendering him immortal until the secret is uncovered. Physically, he is most often described as thin. A bony, almost skeletal man, sometimes hunched. Extremely old, yet unnaturally strong dark piercing eyes. Sometimes armored, sometimes in rags. His character traits are equally distinctive, cunning and manipulative, obsessed with immortality, and dangerous toward women, often abducting princesses or brides. Kostya's defining feature is that his soul, death, or life force is hidden outside of his body. Kostya's death is hidden in a needle. The needle is inside an egg. The egg is inside a duck. The duck is inside a hare. The hare is inside an iron chest. The chest is buried under a green oak tree, on the island of Bayan, in the middle of the sea. Only by retrieving and breaking the needle can the hero kill Kostya. Until then, he is functionally immortal. Kostya is featured in numerous East Slavic fairy tales, most notably in Ivan Tsarevich and Maria Morevna. He appears as a kidnapper, abducting the princess, leading the hero to embark on the quest of rescuing the princess, retrieving his life force, and destroying it. He symbolizes fear of death, as his form reflects the human desire to escape mortality, greed, as he hoards wealth and women, things he cannot truly enjoy, but refuses to release. In Jungian psychology, he embodies the shadow archetype, which consists of the repressed aspects of the self like fear, lust, and envy. The quest to finding his death is symbolic as well as the hero takes on a journey into the unconscious, confronting fate and hidden truths. Unlike the entities mentioned so far in this video, Kostya is not often claimed as a real-world sighting. Instead, he exists in dreams and visions. Some Belarusian villagers believed he could appear as a gaunt horseman at night, riding silently across fields, interpreted as a warning of war or famine. In Smolensk, during the early 20th century, a man claimed to have been confronted by a thin, bony figure in a dream, who demanded to know where his soul was hidden. The man woke up feverish, and his family interpreted the dream as a brush with Kostya. In some rural Ukrainian regions, an old miserable man, or cruel landlord, was whispered to be a Kostya, implying that Kostya was not only a fairy tale villain, but a metaphor for exploiters in real life. He appears in fantasy works such as Catherine Valente's Deathless, which reimagines him as a tragic, complex figure tied to Soviet history, and animated films like Kostya the Immortal, presenting him as a dark lord, softened for children. Kostya the Deathless remains one of folklore's most chilling creations. A man who has avoided death, yet became monstrous in doing so. Leshy. The Leshy is a forest spirit in Slavic folklore. He is both protector and trickster. Hunters, travelers, and woodcutters knew him as the unpredictable ruler of the forest, one who could either grant safe passage and abundant game, or lead them to their deaths. The Leshy is a shapeshifter, rarely appearing the same way twice. Traditional descriptions include a tall man with pale or bluish skin, green eyes, and long hair, made of grass or vines. His clothing was often said to be made of bark, moss, or leaves. When walking, he was sometimes described as wearing his shoes on the wrong feet, a sign of his otherworldliness. In his true form, he could grow to the height of the tallest trees, or shrink to the size of a blade of grass. He often traveled with wolves and bears, considered his companions or even servants. The Leshy was not inherently evil, but he was dangerous, because he lived by his own laws, not human ones. He was known to mislead travelers, causing them to wander endlessly in circles. He would swap children, taking human babies, and leaving little fairies behind. He can be playful, tricking hunters by mimicking voices, laughter, or the sound of trees falling. At times, he protected the forest fiercely, punishing those who cut too many trees or hunted excessively. Yet, he could also be appeased with offerings of bread, salt, or milk, and hunters often prayed to him before entering the woods. Villagers in the 19th century swore that those who disappeared in the woods had been taken by the Leshy. Sometimes they would return after days, confused and weakened, saying they had been wandering without end, guided by unseen laughter. Hunters told tales of a strange man with reversed boots who appeared to them, warning them against killing too many animals in one hunt. A chilling belief held that if someone laughed too loudly in the forest, the Leshy would borrow their voice and use it to call others into the thicket. The Leshy is a clear survival of pagan animism, the belief that every part of nature is inhabited by a spirit. Forests, being vast and mysterious, needed a powerful guardian. Some scholars see him as a diminished echo of a forest god from the pre-Christian Slavs, later reimagined as a mischievous spirit after Christianization. He represents the law of nature beyond human control, a reminder of the respect due to wild places, where greed and arrogance could bring punishment. Alkonost. The alkonost is a mythological bird from Slavic folklore, a creature that blends the divine and the sorrowful. She is usually depicted with the body of a bird, often resembling a kingfisher or sometimes a peacock, and the face or torso of a beautiful woman. Her name is believed to derive from Alcyone, a figure in Greek mythology transformed into a kingfisher. Through Byzantine cultural influence, this myth was adapted into Slavic imagination, where the alkonost became something uniquely Slavic. The alkonost is described as a bird of dazzling colors, radiant and heavenly. Her wings shimmered with unnatural light, often compared to jewels or rainbow hues. Her face was that of a woman, sometimes kind, sometimes sorrowful. When she sang, all who heard her fell into a trance, forgetting everything else. Her most famous power is her voice. Anyone who heard her song would abandon work, duties, even food, to listen, often until they perished from hunger or despair. Some traditions describe her as carrying messages between worlds, the mortal and the divine. The alkonost's song was sorrowful, filled with longing and inevitable tragedy. Medieval Russian manuscripts and church art sometimes depicted Alkonost's siren perched on the tree of life, reflecting her spiritual role. She occasionally appears as a mystical bird that heroes encounter in epic tales, her song testing their strength of will. There are stories from Russian peasants in the 18th and 19th centuries describing people hearing an earthly bird song near rivers or forests and falling into inexplicable sadness afterward. One account tells of a hunter who claimed he fell asleep in the woods after hearing a woman's voice in birdsong. When he woke up, 3 days had passed, and he remembered nothing but the overwhelming beauty of the sound. Villagers said he had heard the alkonost. In medieval Russian texts, she appears as a bird of heaven, whose voice was said to be so beautiful it made listeners forget all earthly things. The alkonost is deeply tied to religious syncretism. In early Slavic Christianity, she became associated with the Garden of Paradise. She symbolizes a personification of human longing for love, for joy, for eternity, always unattainable. A warning against distraction and surrender to beauty at the expense of duty. In essence, she is both gift and curse. Her song is divine, but to humans it is unbearable. Ophir. Long before Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Slavic world whispered about the ophir. This being was the prototype of the vampire myth that would later spread across Europe. The word ophir is thought to derive from Proto-Slavic roots meaning screamer or howler. Written mentions ophir as early as the 11th century, in Russian chronicles condemning pagan practices that worshipped ophir. The ophir was not just a bloodsucker, it was a reanimated corpse, a revenant that crawled from its grave to torment the living. While Western vampires are often elegant aristocrats, the ophir was a far more grotesque and unsettling figure. In contrast to the elegant vampire of Gothic fiction, the ophir was more corpse-like, closer to the grotesque revenants of medieval Europe. It was a peasant's nightmare, shaped by the harsh realities of village life, disease, and death. Descriptions varied, but some common traits included a bloated, ruddy or darkened body, nails and hair appearing to grow after death, a natural decomposition phenomenon, eyes wide open, glowing or bloodshot, traces of blood on the lips or chest, sometimes more human-looking, but unnaturally pale. The ophir could walk in daylight, though weaker. It attacks the kin, often first preying on its own relatives, a sign of unresolved ties. The ophir emerged from fears surrounding death and burial. In Slavic belief, not all dead found peace. Those who died violent deaths, suicides, the unbaptized, or the wicked, could become restless dead. Key causes for becoming an ophir are improper burial rites. For example, being buried outside consecrated ground, dying during liminal times like Kapala Night, which is a Slavic midsummer festival, or solstices, which are the turning points of the year, like the longest day or the longest night. Being a sorcerer, witch, or one who made a pact with dark forces, being the child of a witch. Villagers developed elaborate rituals to prevent an ophir from rising. Staking, which consisted of driving a stake through the corpse's chest, decapitation, and burying the head between the legs or away from the body. Burning, as complete incineration of the body was the surest way. Putting iron in the grave, like placing sickles, nails, or coins in the coffin to pin the corpse down. Burying face down, so that if the ophir tried to claw upward, it would dig deeper into the earth. These practices are well documented by ethnographers, and match vampire exorcism rituals found later across Europe. Accounts of ophir activity were also widespread and documented. In Ukraine, during the 17th century, a chronicle records that a village dug up a suspected ophir, whose corpse was bloated with fresh blood. After it was staked, a plague ceased in the area. In Poland, during the 18th century, reports of ophir were so frequent that mass exhumations occurred. Corpses found with signs of decay, like blood around the mouth or a bloated belly, were misinterpreted as vampirism and burned. Western travelers in Eastern Europe often carried these stories back home, sparking the vampire craze of the 18th century and cementing the legacy of the ophir as a predecessor. The ophir reflects anxieties about death, improper ritual, and community order. Its role as a family predator may symbolize guilt, grief, and unresolved ties between the living and the dead.